Let's speak now with David Patrikarakos, who I always enjoy reading in the Daily Mail. He's their special correspondent, also author of the book Nuclear Iran, The Birth of an Atomic State. I'm pleased to say David joins me on the line now. Thank you very much for your time. Before we sort of get the very latest on where we are with regards to the ever-moving picture with the US and Israeli strikes on Iran, your thoughts firstly on Sir Tony Blair's intervention and how significant it is, David?
Well, Henry, I have to agree with you, first and foremost. If Tony Blair, as skillful a media operator as Tony Blair is, if he didn't want those words out in public, he wouldn't have said them. The pearl clutching now, I have to say, seems to be slightly disingenuous. So why is he doing it? Well, I mean, most immediately, he has a point, I guess, in that, one day we might need the US. But I'd point something else out. There are certain things that we didn't follow the US along with. Vietnam is one of them, and I have to say that was probably an incredibly good idea. So it's not a hugely helpful intervention, is it? Especially to a Labour colleague. So I think Tony Blair is trying to have his say, and I wonder if, given the state of his relations with the Trump administration over Gaza and stuff, whether he's perhaps trying to, keep all options open.
Well, that was an interesting point. I was going to get onto that because he is on this board of peace, self-styled board of peace that Donald Trump has convened. He's one of the sort of major players on it. And in some ways, he's sort of acting like, and again, we don't know fully if these comments were intended to be public, but in some ways he's acting as a sort of envoy, isn't he? And a sort of trying to lobby, you could see it as, for America's position, or am I reading too much into it?
No, I think that's a fairly fair assessment. I mean, look, Tony Blair, let's not forget, has actually been a lobbyist since he left government for many people. So I think that's entirely fair. He doesn't have any political office anymore. So I guess the power that he has, the influence that he has, is as a lobbyist, is someone that has access into all of the corridors of power. And he's clearly trying to leverage that. For what end, I don't know. But it is also quite funny to hear funny's the wrong word, but it's something to hear Tony Blair, responsible for the disaster of Iraq, urging us now to go into Iran.
Well, quite. If we get on to the substance of Iran, you've covered many conflicts, David. Are you clear still? Because I'm still slightly in the dark, or I can't quite work out what the official reasoning was or is. I mean, we can all agree that it's good news on the surface level that the Ayatollah is gone, although we know that the sort of clerics are close to choosing a successor. But do we know what the reason was? Because we've heard different sort of stories from Steve Witkoff to President Trump to Marco Rubio to everyone.
I'm not sure that we do. I think there's two issues here. I think, look, there is an overarching reason here. And it was clear that a decision had been made in the United States and in Israel that this regime had to go. And I think it was clear during last year's 12-day war, which I actually don't call a war, I call an exchange, because the war didn't end, as we're seeing right now. I think, though, Henry, what is more important, and this is something that I'm still pondering after having spoken to US and Israeli officials all week, the reasoning is one thing. What's the plan? Now, I agree with you. As I wrote, Iran's supreme leader is dead, and I'm glad. But what now? Now, if there is a small or a short, concise and limited campaign to degrade the leadership and critically to take out its ballistic missile weapons capability and critically the launchers, then I understand it. And this is what a large part of this is all about. Those missiles, Henry, did a huge amount of damage to Israel and can do a huge amount of damage to America and its allies in the Middle East, as we're seeing. That makes sense. Ideas of regime change I find far more problematic. There is no opposition leadership. If you degrade the leadership, more leaders will emerge from the regime. And you can keep doing this and keep doing this. So what is the end game? I'm still unclear, and I'm starting to get worried.
OK, and I mean, that's sort of, I recognise that position. Broadly, then, you do understand, though, despite that lack of an endgame or endgame that we know about, the actions, or are you unclear on the sort of, what we saw just over a week ago?
Look, I think there is a feeling that this regime has for decades caused mayhem, caused murder. It has funded terror. It has tried to assassinate people on British streets, Henry. It has killed people around the world. It has caused havoc in Lebanon, havoc in Gaza, havoc in Yemen. So I think that what is guiding this is an impulse that since the fall of its regional proxies, the decapitation of Hezbollah, the degrading of Hamas, it was seen as this is the window, it's now or never. You also have to factor in domestic political considerations. Don't forget, all foreign policy decisions are a large part a product of domestic considerations. Trump wants to deal with this. He's going to go into the midterms. He's also in his second and final term, whatever he tries to tell us. I think that many people in Jerusalem, in Washington, D.C., thought it's now or never. Is that the best reason? Well, probably not. But I think that's where we are.
You mentioned the political sort of onus behind this, and it's pretty opaque that is the reason. With regards to the UK standing with the United States, we'll be talking more about the special relationship a bit later on. But and I know people sort of hate that hackneyed phrase, but if we just look at the sort of general security relationship we have with the United States. Has this permanently damaged such, or is this just Donald Trump venting his frustrations out in the open, do you think?
Look, there's two things here. First of all, what Donald Trump has said. Donald Trump has said this. Tomorrow, he could tweet Keir Starmer is his most favourite foreign leader. He could quite easily do that. So in terms of what Trump says, I don't read too much into it. I'm not entirely sure that this military action has universal support in DC, so I don't actually worry about it permanently damaging our relationship. I think if after 9/11 we'd refused to help the United States in Afghanistan, that might have been a serious issue. I think this will be okay. Look, Keir Starmer is a weak leader. He's a deeply uncharismatic leader. Everyone takes the opportunity to put the boot into him all the time. And let's not forget, this did come out after, I think, Trump had just met with Nigel Farage in DC. So I'm sure there are all sorts of things going on in these comments.
Thank you very much for your time, as always, David. Negar Mortzavi is an Iranian-American journalist who's senior fellow of the Center for International Policy think tank, also host of the Iran podcast, and joins us from Washington, D.C. And always grateful for your time, so thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Could you just describe, appreciate you're not there, but you'll have been following some of what we've heard over the last few hours. Let's start with Lebanon. Israel is targeting that particular country because of the militia Hezbollah.
Correct. So the war, again, has expanded to new fronts, as we saw in the past 2 or 3 years, post October 7th, the war in Gaza, and that, it wasn't contained to one area, and it kept reopening in new fronts. That's from the Israeli side. But then this is also while U.S. engagement in the war continues, Iran's retaliation continues. Many of the Gulf countries, Arab countries across the Persian Gulf, are involved in the war, and it just seems to be expanding, and with no de-escalation or off-ramp in sight, at least anytime soon. And of course, I just want to remind your viewers that the main casualty of this are the civilians. On the Iranian side, over 1,000, nearly 1,500 civilians have been killed. Now, it seems like when you talk to people in Tehran that the targeting is getting a lot more indiscriminate. It's no longer just military sites or, targeting that people would understand as far as the U.S. going after the regime. It's also oil refineries, water salination. One of the first targets on day one, on that Saturday morning, the U.S. target was a girls' elementary school. That is still being investigated here in the U.S. how that happened, but it wasn't really in the thick of the war or before any retaliation had started. So the scenes that we're seeing coming and the people that I'm speaking to on the ground, everything is just very horrific. People are horrified in Iran, across the region, in Lebanon, and of course in Israel. I mean, Israeli civilians are also paying the price of this war. And just to reiterate the question that especially is being asked here in the U.S., in U.S. Congress and among the public, is why? Why did this war start? Why is it going on? And what's the plan?
Well, and we've had different explanations. Do we know what the official line from the White House is at the moment with regards to that one-word question, why?
Today, because, it changes by the...
Sure, today, as of, what is it, sort of 10 o'clock your time?
Exactly. So the point is, we have heard a wide range of seasoning, essentially the entire kitchen sink. It started with... One of the main ones was the nuclear program, Iran's nuclear program. But remember last June, the U.S. in Operation Midnight Hammer and
12-day war, as it's referred to, yes.
Yeah, well, the 12-day war by the Israelis, but a 25-minute operation by
Sure.
the US, Midnight Hammer, the nuclear program was obliterated. That statement still exists on the White House website of how the Iranian nuclear program was completely obliterated. So which is it? Was it obliterated? Was it going to start again? And by the way, the UN nuclear watchdog has just said, and we're not taking the Iranian word for this, UN nuclear watchdog IAEA has said that the program was not weaponizing or getting anywhere close to a weapons program. So that's the nuclear issue. The missile program, the administration, president have tried to portray the missile program as threat to America, potentially even the US. Iran's missiles don't reach to the US or to Europe. They reach Israel because, they've used them as defense. Then came the right to protest for Iranian protesters. Well, how has the bombing really helped Iranian protesters? We haven't seen any protests. We've just seen people trying to flee from the bombing, whoever can, and whoever can't just stay put and potentially get killed. So, the reasoning just fluctuates. And then eventually, regime change. Initially, it wasn't a regime change war. Initially, it wasn't even war. It was a military operation. Now it's war. It wasn't regime change, and it was one of the first targets was the top leadership, the supreme leader of the regime. And then what's the plan? What's the plan for a regime change war? Americans ask, because, regime change wars in the Middle East launched by the U.S. are very popular now.
Let me ask you were talking about some of the non-military sites that have been targeted in Tehran. For example, I was reading a piece over the last few days that you had a situation where where historic sites in Tehran have been bombed. And even I was reading of a police station where you had innocent Iranians who were in there sort of giving statements to the police on something completely different who end up being killed. You read of a real sense of relief at the killing of the Ayatollah. However, with what we've seen over killings over the last few days and the change in the parameters of what is acceptable to be bombed, do you sense that support, and look, we can talk about what the end game is, but the support over the action of killing the Ayatollah is actually going to be usurped soon by regular Iranians going, well, we didn't sign up for this?
Absolutely. So he was a controversial figure. I would say that there's, it's very polarized. You saw people pouring to the street to grieve for him. And this is even beyond Iran's border across the Shia world. And then you saw people coming to the streets celebrate the assassination. It's like...
Sure. I mean, there would be many more, but they've been killed who would have celebrated the assassination.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you're celebrating, you don't have the safety of someone who's mourning. But anyways, I'm just pointing out to a very polarized society with two very opposite ends. But then when came the bombing, essentially these quote unquote freedom bombs, because also freedom for the Iranian people was thrown in as one of the reasonings. When these freedom bombs started coming, starting with an elementary girls' school, I want to emphasize this girls' school because it was one of the first targets on a morning. It was a double tap on a school, 160 kids killed, 14 teachers. And people start realizing that this war is real. It really is as much a war on civilians as the regime, or maybe even more. I mean, compare the number of regime officials or senior leaders who have been killed compared to the number of children, to the civilians and the civilian targets, like you're saying. I mean, there's regime stronghold, there's IRGC, there's also your local police station, which is in densely populated urban areas. Water salination, like I said, many hospitals have been attacked either directly or as very close to a target that was attacked with very heavy bombardment. Other schools, you name it, gyms, all kinds of civilian infrastructure, just roads, people trying to get out of harm's way or going back home, going to work. And also, we have to remember, life continues. I had friends and family members who fled to Tehran, but that can't go indefinite. They're like, we got to get back to work and make a living. So now they're back in the city, going to work, going shopping, going to places. Schools are closed, but not everything has stopped in the country. And it's very unsafe. Some of the scenes are apocalyptic for people. After the attack on refineries, people are reporting a rain that feels like oil is coming from the sky. You look at the water on the ground, it's black. The air in Tehran is very polluted. It's a thick smoke in the air. It almost feels like evening in the morning. So it's just very horrific scenes that we're seeing. And with no end in sight.
Well, you paint a picture there of that sort of oily rain and the black liquid, as you say. You spoke about the girls' school, by the way. Important to say that funny enough, it was sort of a week ago when I came on air. We still didn't know what had happened, and we still have Iran blaming Israel blaming Iran, the US blaming Hezbollah. I mean, we just don't know. But you're very right to raise it, Anega. Can I play you this? This is senior Republican US Senator Lindsey Graham, who's known for now, I mean, never was previously, but now a very close ally of President Trump. This was him speaking on Fox News in the last few hours.
We're going to blow the hell out of these people. This regime is in a death row now. It is going to be on its knees. It's going to fall. And when it falls, we're going to have peace like no other time. We're going to have prosperity unlike anyone could ever imagine. Peace brings prosperity. You can't do it by talking. The Democrats criticize this operation. They didn't do a damn thing. These men and women in the military should make us all proud.
Your response?
Go back to the school very quickly. This hits home for me because I grew up through the 1980s war between Iran and Iraq, and I was a schoolgirl, elementary school in Tehran, under bombardment, missiles, bombs. This could have been me. Now we are seeing U.S. investigators telling multiple credible American outlets, New York Times, CNN, Reuters, that it was very likely the U.S., the targeting of the school. Now the reasoning is still being investigated, but as far as this being Iran, that has been debunked.
Okay.
It seems like it wasn't the Israelis and it was the U.S. So I'm still waiting for that investigation. I hope to God it wasn't deliberate, but nevertheless, whatever the reasoning, is just unacceptable.
Okay.
And so as Lindsey Graham, I mean, he has just been aligning himself publicly and privately very much with the Israeli government, the Israeli prime minister, and this just seems to be very much aligned with what the Israeli prime minister has wanted for 2 decades. And it's not a secret. I mean, he's been on the record, Prime Minister Netanyahu, for 2 decades, wanting the U.S. to go to war with Iran, a regime change war with Iran. And he finally got it in a president that ironically is calling himself the president of peace. I mean, President Trump keeps boasting that he should be given the Nobel Peace Prize for ending wars. And look at this. He just started potentially the next big Middle East regime change war, maybe even worse than Iraq, maybe worse than Afghanistan. And who's benefiting, I think, the Israeli prime minister, the Israeli government. The U.S. public is certainly not benefiting. This war is very unpopular here. The American people weren't even consulted. Regime change wars, Iraq, Afghanistan. The administration went to the U.S. Congress. They went to the UN Security Council. The international community wasn't consulted. The UN is speaking up against this. And so I think the one party who is absolutely benefiting from this is Israel. They want a weak state in Iran, essentially maybe even a failed state, maybe multiple state partitions or whatever. They just want to make sure they defang and remove any perceived threat from Iran, or if not, to be able to go back in and mow the grass or mow the lawn as they have been doing with Gaza and now they're doing with Lebanon.